If you've had any cryptid encounters that you'd like shared on here, email me at jtt2sstories@gmail.com. Story 1. So to begin, this story happened back in 2018. I arrived in this small, rural town near Cape May, New Jersey. The company I was working for at the time was sending me out to go door to door, advertising cable and Wi-Fi that they wanted me to sell. I was getting weird vibes all throughout the day, as the town itself was very small and a bit creepy, with people staring at me or giving me the cold shoulder for the entire day. It seemed like a lot of the townsfolk that I encountered that day were on edge, and it was a weird, tense atmosphere that I shrugged off, as people are weird all the time. I continued doing my job, chugging Red Bull to keep me going, which surprisingly didn't affect me at all. Besides the weird atmosphere, the scenery was actually quite pretty once you got off the main road. I had to stop at different streets, and some were in the woods on long and seemingly beautiful endless roads. It was quite scenic. Just before sunset, I was scheduled to visit a few houses on a small peninsula. To get to this peninsula, you have to go down a very long road, past a summer camp area, past a trailer park, past the woods, and then you finally find yourself in a small open area with a bay marsh, a couple small expensive houses, and shore access. The houses were so close to the water it seemed to be a code violation, but I'm sure they were built to withstand storms since they looked so expensive. Every house had its own theme, and the area was mostly deserted. Only one house had someone inside, whom I'd talked to after knocking on his door. I was so distracted, looking at the houses and scenery, that I didn't even notice how fast sunset was approaching. I came to the realization that I should start heading back, to avoid being alone on that long deserted pathway in the woods. As a smaller female, I've never felt comfortable after dark and isolated places, especially without cell service. I was making my way down the path. So far, so good, as it wasn't completely dark yet. As I approached the wooded area of the road, I was walking a bit faster, since there were no streetlights, and the sunlight was rapidly disappearing. As I walked at a decently fast pace, I noticed something. The woods were eerily quiet. All the life that I was hearing before was now gone. No crickets, no birds, just pure silence. I stopped in my tracks and got chills down my spine, as I felt the feeling that I was being watched. I looked around the dark woods for any sudden movements, and then, like clockwork, something up ahead made its way out of the tree line. It looked to be some type of large animal. My brain went into overdrive analyzing whatever this animal was. Was it a bear, a dog? No, it looked like a large dog, but dogs don't get this big. I was intimidated by its large size. Whatever it was hadn't noticed me. Even though I was scared, I also didn't want to walk back and go into that one man's house. As a woman, I'd rather take my chances with a wild animal than be alone with a guy I don't know in a deserted holiday neighborhood. Suddenly, as I was thinking this, the large animal in the distance had finally noticed my presence. It was observing me, not entirely sure of what to do with me. There wasn't enough light anymore for me to see the animal's face, but I felt unusually frightened. Whatever I was looking at was definitely too big to be a black bear, with a shoulder height of at least 5 feet on all fours, which is comparable in size to a brown bear. The mass on this creature was extensive, as the outline of what I could see looked like a wolf on steroids. It was very muscular. I also noticed that the outline of its face was very similar to that of a German shepherd or wolf, as it had perked ears and a long snout. In the heat of the moment, I could only hear the sound of my heart palpitating as fear and adrenaline started to crawl its way into my bloodstream. It felt as if time stood still, and then it dawned on me. What I was looking at wasn't a normal animal. It was simply too big to be any animal that I could recognize from New Jersey's catalog of fauna. And if it wanted to attack me, I'd be completely powerless against it. It was simply too big. Though to calm myself down, I threw the idea that the creature was out of the ordinary out because it felt like this could be rationalized somehow. I made my brain go back to the idea of this thing maybe being a large dog or a coyote. I also did not believe in cryptids and was completely unaware of what size coyotes are supposed to be, so I made a quick decision. Realizing that this could very well be a life or death situation, I came to the conclusion that this very large dog-like creature probably a skittish coyote that I could scare off, at least temporarily, to calm down my nerves. What other choice did I have? The longer I kept standing there, the more aggressive I might come across to this animal, and I didn't want it to get territorial or to get the idea that I was easy prey. So I decided I'd make the most hideous, loud, confusing, and startling scream I could muster and just sprint the rest of the way. After I screeched this hideous sound out of my body as hard as I could, the animal quickly changed its body language to defensive, but then it quickly changed its mind to deciding that I wasn't worth a fight, as it ran a decent distance into the woods. Not too far, though. I decided to sprint as fast as I could past that area and beyond. I sprinted until I reached the end of the road, and I noticed there was a summer camp area with streetlights near me. I rested on top of a table there, out of breath, and feeling my heart pound out of my chest. However, I was still very shaken up and still felt like I was being watched. I kept my eyes on the tree line. My eyes were darting around, looking for any sign that this animal was still there. Once I felt like the coast was clear, I located the next house that I was scheduled to visit, and I quickly made my way over. I met a nice family who ended up buying cable from me, and I told them what happened to me that night and how I was treated by the locals. The lady of the family, who I presumed to be the mother, said, "I don't know why they sent you out here alone. These woods are dangerous after dark, and there are creepy people who live around here." The impression she was giving me was that there were animal encounters she couldn't explain. There were lots of ex-convicts in the area, and people who should have been arrested but weren't. She was equally concerned about the people as she was the animals around this place. This gave me goosebumps. How many times today could my life have been taken? They were extremely concerned for my safety and told me to contact my team leader so I could get picked up. They said they didn't want me to go outside again, that I should call it quits for the night and not make it to any other houses. To this day, I still have no idea what creature I'd encountered. There are strange things in the woods. Things people don't speak about or things people cover up. I felt like the townsfolk of that town knew something about what I encountered. So weird creature I encountered in the woods? Let's never meet again. Story 2. The incident happened in late summer 2018. It was in the mountains of northern Georgia. I'm a surveyor with 20 years of experience in Georgia, Tennessee, Alabama, and both North and South Carolina. So I'm extremely comfortable in the woods, as I spend so much time outdoors, and most of that time is being spent very far back in the forest, a great deal of it on national forestry land, where you don't see anyone for days at a time. On the day that it happened, I was surveying a piece of property around a small Corps of Engineers lake bordering a large tract of national forest land. I was operating a robotic survey total station, transit, which means you don't need a partner to run a survey crew, and instead of having 2 or 3 people on a crew, you generally work alone. The property was fairly large, approximately 500 acres, made up of mostly steep mountains and hollows covered in dense mountain laurel. I'd just finished up cutting a traverse line along the property line running to the top of the ridge, roughly 350 to 400 feet away with my machete. Traverse lines are generally about 5 feet wide and cut as close to the ground as possible to ensure line of sight for the instrument. Just walked back down the slope to get ready to traverse to the top of the ridge when I noticed someone or something hairy, wearing what I originally thought was a hat, slowly walking across the opening that I'd just made a few minutes earlier to stop and look at me. It had a large hand reaching up to grab the tree limb it was next to. At the time, I thought someone must have been walking or hiking to the top of the ridge, as it's not uncommon to see people from time to time. But then I realized it was way too hot to be wearing a large, shaggy brown jacket, as it was in the high 90s. And as it stared down the hill at me, I could make out pointed ears on top of its head and a long snout. Then it slowly walked out of sight. At this point, I took out my headphones and started paying closer attention to the situation. As I took out my headphones, I realized it was dead silent in the woods. In Georgia during the summertime, it's always extremely loud with insects. I waited a few minutes and walked to the top of the ridge to grab my equipment. Then I seriously considered leaving and to see what was going on. And I noticed disturbed vegetation heading in the direction that I saw it walking. Thinking harder about what was happening, I realized that the lower limb on the tree I saw it walk behind as it went out of sight was right at 6 feet tall. What I originally thought to be a jacket was fur. That's when it all set in and I got scared. I could hear something moving in the short distance coming from the area I walked to, so I decided to making 45 to 50-minute walk to the truck. I could hear movement up on the ridge parallel and above me during my walk back, but I didn't think it was moving in reaction to me necessarily, although I wasn't willing to wait around and find out. I made it to the truck, and since then, I've only told 2 people about my experience. That was pretty much it as far as the encounter goes. I know it wasn't a bear, as I've been around them my whole life and I see them all the time. I've definitely been deep in the woods on several occasions and experienced all sounds and signs of life just disappear at the drop of a hat. It takes on a new significance now. I carry a pistol every day, and on some occasions a short rifle if the job calls for it, due to bears, wild hogs, finding, illegal operations, etc., but I can definitely say it brought me zero comfort on that day. I was scared to my very core, and I have a new sense of respect for the woods now. I would advise that if you work alone in the woods, please pay attention to your surroundings. I think a lot about what might have happened if I hadn't looked up when I did, or if I had been a little slower walking back downhill, as I was probably very close to it with my back turned before walking downhill with my headphones in, listening to Joe Rogan. If it wanted me, I wouldn't be here today. I firmly believe that I was within mere yards of it up on the ridge, with no idea I was being shadowed by a monster. People come missing all the time in the woods and are never seen again. I believe I know it takes some of them as I've seen it. Whether you believe me or not is of no consequence to me, but it took me a long time to feel comfortable before telling anyone about my experience. It helps one person pay attention in the woods. I'm happy to be called crazy over it. Stay safe and please watch your kids in the woods above all else. God bless.